Good morning. So it's been a while. It's been a while since I've posted any Bible videos. I hope I'm holding this microphone in the right spot. I'm done using the Blue Yeti microphone because that thing was irritating me so much. So instead, I'm using this $20 microphone that plugs straight into my phone. And anyways, I needed a break after Matthew. After 28 videos spent on Matthew, that took I don't know even how many months. Your girl needed a break and needed to revitalize that Bible life. So, instead of starting a new book and going chapter by chapter in the Bible, we're going to go by a topic. Now, my next topic after today's is going to be, I don't know when. I don't know when that's going to come out because I have to do my own research and come to my conclusion. But it's on the topic of women in positions of authority within the church. And if God says that women should specifically not hold positions of authority solely based on their gender. Okay, so really it's just if gender affects your position of authority in the church. Okay, got it? That is not today's topic. That's going to take some time to come to because there's a lot of things in the Bible about that. But what I am going to talk to you about today is the Sabbath because there's a lot of things about that in the Bible. However, I think it's quite clear. So we're going to start from the beginning, go through the most important passages in the Bible, in my opinion, about the Sabbath. But the place where we're going to start is the ultimate beginning, which is the story of creation. So if you go to Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3, we're going to read that. It says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation." So you have the 6 days of God creating the universe. He rested on the Sabbath, and he says that he made it holy. Okay? So literally first week of the universe, there's the Sabbath. It has been there from the start. God rested on the seventh day. Okay? Now we're going to jump ahead in time. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 16. Now what's happening is that the Israelites are escaping from Egypt, going back to the promised land. And so God has been giving them manna because obviously they don't have food. And when he gives them manna, they go out in the morning, it's in the field, and they collect it. But for the Sabbath, he is going to give them more on the 6th day. That way they don't collect on the 7th day. So this is what it says, verses 22 to 30. "On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers each. And when all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, 'This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake, and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept till the morning.' So they laid it aside till the morning, as Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there were no worms in it. Moses said, 'Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none.' On the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, 'How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the 7th day.' So the people rested on the 7th day." So, typically, if the people tried to gather more than what they needed for that day, when they would wake up the next day, it would have rotted, it had worms in it, because God was trying to make the point of rely and trust on me, that I'm going to give you your food every day that you need it. On the sixth day, he gave them extra so that they wouldn't have to do any work on the Sabbath. And as it said, when they woke up on the Sabbath, their manna was still good and okay to eat. It did not have any foodborne illnesses. They were not getting food poisoning from it. It was rock solid. Okay, so we see from the beginning that God, he keeps to the Sabbath himself, like he follows it. That is part of his design. And then he tells the Israelites that they're to follow it as well on this the Exodus from Egypt. And then when we get the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20, commandment number, I think it's the 4th. Let's count. Okay. You shall have no other gods, no idols, not take the Lord's name in vain. Okay, yes. So the Sabbath is the 4th commandment. So if you go to Exodus chapter 20, verse 8, this is what it says. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So they explicitly, in the commandment, God explicitly calls back to the creation story, says, I did this from the beginning, this is my design, and so you are going to follow that and keep the Sabbath. I also want to point out how I'm going to say extreme, for lack of a better term, how extreme he is in keeping the Sabbath. It's not just that you don't work or your kids don't work. It's also that your servants don't work, or even your livestock. And it says the sojourner who is with you. So it's anyone who is under your authority is to not work. Okay? Which I kind of like. I think in the States, a lot of businesses stay open on Sunday or Saturday, which we'll get into that later on and things for the Sabbath. But I like the idea that you and your business take the Sabbath, all of it. Like, you could take it off and then still pay people to work that day, but no. God tells you that in commandment number 4, that not your male servant, your female servant, your livestock, or the sojourner who's within your gates is to work on the Sabbath. To him, it's very serious. And if we go back to chapter 16, it says, what is it? Boil what you will boil and bake what you will bake. So it's literally telling them all the work that you need to get done, cooking included, get it done the day before, because this is the Sabbath, and he is trying to make you rest completely. Okay? Now, moving on, Exodus chapter 31, verses 12 to 18. And the Lord said to Moses, you are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbaths. For this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. You shall keep the Sabbath because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from his people. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. Therefore the people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as a covenant forever. It is a sign forever between me and the people of Israel, that in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. And he gave to Moses when he had finished speaking with him on the Mount Sinai, the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. So, again, clear callback to Genesis. 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. So, it was part of God's good design, and so we are to keep that. I also like that it says that the Sabbath, keeping the Sabbath, is how the Lord sanctifies us. So it literally, which the word sanctify, let me flip in my notes, it literally means to set apart, separate, holy, it's consecrated, and so it sets you apart as holy, basically, is the meaning as of the word sanctify. So, if you want to improve in the area of sanctification, you have to keep the Sabbath, or at least that's what we've read so far in the Old Testament. And it was very serious because it says the punishment for not keeping the Sabbath is death. Literally the death penalty. That's how serious they were. That you do not do any work on the Sabbath. Okay? So, continuing on. Now, there's a lot of mentions of the Sabbath in the Old Testament. Clearly, because we just learned that it's very, very important. So, I'm not going to read everything. But in Leviticus chapter 16, verse 31, and 23, verse 32, it talks about the Day of Atonement, which was a Sabbath day. And then in Leviticus 19, 3 and 30, it talks about the Sabbath. Leviticus 23 talks about which feasts are Sabbath days. Same for Leviticus 23, 39. In Leviticus 24, verse 8, it talks about the Levitical priest eating the bread of the presence, which was only to be eaten by the priest on the Sabbath. And then in Leviticus chapter 25, and I'm actually going to read this one because I think it's so interesting. Verses 1 to 7 talk about a Sabbath year. You didn't even know this, people. A Sabbath year. You can find it. Okay, in chapter 25, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land that I shall give you, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years you shall sow your field, and for 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in it its fruits. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap what grows of itself in your harvest, or gather the grapes of your undressed vine. It shall be a year of solemn rest for the land. The Sabbath of the land shall provide food for you, for yourself, and for your male and your female slaves, and for your hired worker and the sojourner who lives with you, and for your cattle and for the wild animals that are in your land. All its yield shall be food for you. So, literally a Sabbath year. Okay? God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that the land needs a break. It needs that nutrients and whatnot, and that your land will perform better if you give it a break. So 6 years you work it, the 7th year you give it a break. It's almost like that was part of God's good design. Are we making connections here? Okay, so I think it was the CEO of Chick-fil-A, and he had been asked why they, close on Sunday. And he said, I think, because he's a Christian, that if we close on Sunday and honor the Sabbath, that we will continue to bring in more revenue the 6 days that we're open than if we were open and working 7 days, which I absolutely love, because if you follow God's design, that's exactly what he intended. That if you follow what he intended for us, 6 days you work, 7th you'll rest, that's actually going to benefit you more than just working every day, all day. And so, yeah. I just love that. Also, again, it's not just that the Sabbath is for you, for your family, for your servants, but also for the sojourner who lives with you and your cattle and the wild animals that are on your land. It's good for them. Like, I don't know, but I just love that. It's literally for every living thing that they benefit from you keeping the Sabbath. All right, Leviticus chapter 26. I need to sniffle. Okay, I hope you didn't hear that on the microphone. Okay, Leviticus chapter 26 verse 2 to 13. Okay? This is under the title for this section is blessings for obedience. Okay, so that's not really, that wasn't in the original Bible manuscripts, that little title, but that's just what I want you to know this section is talking about, blessings for obedience. Okay, verse 2. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. If you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them, then I will give you your rains in their season, and the land shall yield its increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing shall last to the time of the grape harvest, and the grape harvest shall last to the time for sowing. And you shall eat your bread to the full and dwell in your land securely. I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. And I will remove harmful beasts from the land, and the sword shall not go through your land. You shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall chase 10,000, and your enemies shall fall before you by the sword. I will turn to you and make you fruitful and multiply you, and will confirm my covenant with you. You shall eat old store long kept, and you shall clear out the old to make way for the new. I will make my dwelling among you, and my soul shall not abhor you. And I will walk among you and will be your God, and you shall be my people. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that you should not be their slaves. And I have broken the bars of your yoke and made you walk erect. So, very clear that if you keep God's commandments, which very clearly says that you are to keep the Sabbath, then you will be blessed. And then if you want to continue reading after that, in verse 14 it goes into punishments for disobedience, which we're not going to read, but just think about basically the opposite of all the good things we just read. Yeah. Okay. Now, oh shoot, I just hit the microphone. All right, we're going to jump to Numbers chapter 15. Now this is when we first see a violation of the Sabbath. Okay, chapter 15, verses 32 to 36. Hold on. I'm so sorry. I don't know why my nose is being difficult all of a sudden. I tried covering it so that you could hear it even less. Okay. Verse 32. While the people of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him in custody because it had not been made clear what should be done to him. And the Lord said to Moses, "The man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp." And all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death with stones, as the Lord commanded him. So, you have a guy, it's the Sabbath, he decides to collect sticks, and just as God said, the punishment for not keeping the Sabbath is death. So they stone him. Okay? Collecting sticks. Sir. For us, that obviously is not very important. For them, they're cooking with fires and all that good stuff. And so it's a little more important for them, but it's like it's collecting sticks. Like, guys, you really wanted to collect sticks, you could have had a day to rest, and you were like, but I think I'll go collect some sticks today. That's what I want to do. Anyways. So, and then in Numbers 28 verses 9 to 10, it talks about the burnt offering that you should give on the Sabbath. Deuteronomy 5 verses 12 to 15 is when the commandments are being given again. And so it's talking about the fourth commandment in verses 12 to 15. Then in Nehemiah. Okay, Nehemiah is a prophet. In case you are not familiar, let me flip there. Oh my gosh. Okay, Nehemiah, you go past 1st, 2nd, Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, Ezra, and then Nehemiah's there, okay? So that way I can help you find it a little easier. In Nehemiah chapter 10, what chapter am I on? Oh, already there. Verse 31, it says, "And if the peoples of the land bring in goods or any grain on the Sabbath day to sell, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath day or on a holy day, and we will forego the crops of the 7th year and the exaction of every debt." So it's saying even if people that for them are not Jewish, the Gentiles are selling goods, okay? They're working, you're not. You are still not to buy from them, okay? That even on the Sabbath, you're not to buy. Okay, that's very clear. If the peoples of the land bring in goods or any grain on the Sabbath day to sell, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath day or a holy day. Okay? And then in Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 15 to 18, let me find it. Okay. "In those days I saw in Judah people treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in heaps of grain and loading them onto donkeys, and also wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of loads, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I warned them on the day when they sold food. Tyrians also who lived in the city brought in fish and all kinds of goods and sold them on the Sabbath to the people of Judah in Jerusalem itself. Then I confronted the nobles of Judah and said to them, 'What is this evil thing that you are doing, profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers act in this way, and did not our God bring all this disaster on us and on this city? Now you are bringing more wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath.'" So, again, other people are bringing in stuff to sell and whatnot, and they know they're selling to Jews, okay? Everyone knew if you lived around the Israelites that they kept the Sabbath and that they're not supposed to do anything, but they don't care. They're selling anyways, and they're doing it because the Israelites are still buying from them on the Sabbath day. And so Nehemiah is calling them out for profaning the Sabbath, okay? You are not to buy or sell on the Sabbath day, okay? Point blank, period. Now, we're jumping to Isaiah, okay? So past Job, past Psalm, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then, or as Kamala Harris said it, Ecclesiastics. Yikes, girl. Anyways, jump to Isaiah. We're going to go to chapter 56. Okay, Isaiah is a very long book. That's why it's taking so long to get there. Chapter 56, verses 1 through 7. "Thus says the Lord, keep justice and do righteousness, for soon my salvation will come, and my righteousness will be revealed. Blessed is the man who does this, and the Son of Man who holds it fast, who keeps the Sabbath, not profaning it, and keeps his hand from doing any evil. Let not the foreigner who has join himself to the Lord say, the Lord will surely separate me from his people. And let not the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. For thus says the Lord to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, who choose the things that please me and hold fast my covenant, I will give in my house and within my walls a monument and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. And the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord, and to be his servants, everyone who keeps the Sabbath and does not profane it, will hold fast my covenant. These I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. So, God makes it very clear. He wants you to keep the Sabbath, and if you keep the Sabbath, then he will bless you. If you will not keep the Sabbath, then he will not bless you. Very, very easy to understand, yes? Okay, then in Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 19 to 27, the Lord gives a warning through Jeremiah to the people that they need to keep the Sabbath. We're not going to read that. In Ezekiel, basically you're just reading that they profaned the Sabbath a lot, okay? In chapter 20, chapter 22, verses 8 and 26, chapter 23, verse 38, okay? It's all about them profaning the Sabbath. And then in Ezekiel 44, verse 24, the priests are told to keep the Sabbath holy. Ezekiel 46, this is talking about keeping the Sabbath feast. And then in Hosea, there's a brief comment about the Sabbaths. Like, once judgment comes, there won't be Sabbaths. After that is, I think, what it said. Let's read it so I can clarify. So I don't lead anyone astray. I'm almost there, guys. Hosea comes after Ezekiel. But is it before Daniel? I don't know. I don't think so. No. Is it after Daniel? Is it after Daniel? Okay, yes. Hosea is after Daniel. Chapter 2, verse 11. And I will put an end to all her mirth, her feast, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her appointed feasts. So that's what it says, which is not really important for our topic of discussion. It's just a brief mention of the Sabbath. And then in Amos, I don't know which people Amos is next to. Okay, I went too far. I think it's before Zechariah. Guys, I'm so sorry. Okay, is it before Zephaniah? I think it's before Habakkuk. Okay, no. Okay, Nahum, Micah, come on. We gotta be somewhere near it. Jonah, Obadiah. Okay, so Amos is before Obadiah and Jonah and all the other prophets. Okay, in Amos chapter 8, verse 5, it says, well, actually, I'm going to start from verse 4 so it makes more sense. Hear this, you who trample on the needy and bring the poor of the land to an end, saying, when will the new moon be over, that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath, that we may offer wheat for sale, that we may make the ephah small and the shekel great, and deal deceitfully with false balances. And then it goes on. But basically, Amos is mocking the Israelites and mimicking them, being like, oh, when will the Sabbath be over so we can sell again? Like, they are looking forward to going back to work. In fact, they are eager for the Sabbath to be over so that they can make money again. And so their hearts are profaning the Sabbath. All right. So that's all the Old Testament references to the Sabbath that we're going to read about. Let's jump into the New Testament. So we're going to go to Matthew chapter 12. And Oh my gosh. I'm almost there, guys. Okay, we're going to read. It's verses 1 to... we're going to read to 14. So, at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him... Oh, shoot. Hold on. I realized I was holding my pen the wrong way. I hope the audio has been okay. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." So, the disciples plucking from the grain fields is considered work, and so that is why the Pharisees are upset. Now, what Jesus says to them, verse 3, he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." So before we go on, in verses 3 to 4, when he's talking about David, this story you can find in 1 Samuel 21. David, and I think there's a few warriors or something with him on the run, and so they are hungry, and they eat the bread of the presence, which in Leviticus 24, 4 through 5, it clearly states that the bread of the presence is only for the priests to eat on the Sabbath. So they broke that rule that God gave, and yet David was still loved by God and was not put to death for profaning the Sabbath. And so that's what he's saying. He's like, oh, well, what about the story of David? Especially because the Jewish people, I say this for lack of a better word, idolize David. You know, everything, it's like, oh, King David. Like, he's the standard, you know? And so, pointing out this story where it's like, well, you love David. You would never say that David profaned the Sabbath. And yet, if you look at his actions, he technically did. And then, he says, "Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless?" And when he's talking about this, the priests are literally commanded to do certain things on the Sabbath, like do certain sacrifices and whatever. God allows and commands them to do these things on the Sabbath. So technically they're working, but God commanded it, and so they are guiltless. That's what he's saying. So God certainly allows certain things to be done on the Sabbath. The problem is that the Israelites, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, their job is just to interpret the word. So when God says in the Old Testament, don't do any work, well, then they need to define what work is. And so they define it in their terms, and they come up with their interpretation. And as we see from Jesus, he's telling them that their interpretation is wrong and it's not good enough. And they don't like that. So, then in verse 7, "And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." So Jesus is saying that he's the Son of Man, he's the Lord of the Sabbath, so he has the ultimate interpretation. Continuing on, verse 9, "He went on from there and entered the synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they asked him, 'Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?' so that they might accuse him. He said to them, 'Which of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than the sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath.' Then he said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' And the man stretched it out, and it was restored healthy like the other. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him." And so Jesus makes a point of, oh, well, if your animal was having a problem on the Sabbath, you would help it, okay? You would still help it even though it's the Sabbath, and you wouldn't consider it work. So why is it if we help other people, other human beings that have more worth to God than an animal, because we're made in his image, why is that not okay? So, now, continuing on. Hold on. I just want to make sure this is recording real quick. Okay, we're good. I just have PTSD from the other videos. Okay, then in Matthew 24, verse 40, it says, oh wait, not verse 40. It's verse 20. My apologies. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath. That is when Jesus is prophesying about the end times, that he says that. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath. Now, you might be like, how does this fit into this? That he's saying that. Well, if it's the Sabbath, well, first of all, okay, when he says pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, he's just talking about like physical and spiritual needs. If your flight is in the winter and it's really cold, that's going to make it really, really miserable. If it's on the Sabbath, well, the Sabbath you're supposed to be keeping by doing no work. In whatever Exodus passage, I think in chapter 16, it said, each of you remain in his home. Well, if you're fleeing for your life or wherever they're going, I don't know. Obviously, that's not really keeping the Sabbath. So that's what he's saying. But the way that this fits in, because we're not actually talking about the prophecy of the end times right now, the fact that he mentions the Sabbath in the future when the end times happen alludes to the fact that Jesus expected there to be a Sabbath, that we would be keeping them in the future. Because if he didn't think that we would still be following the Sabbath, then he would not mention the Sabbath when talking about the future. Does that make sense, party people? Okay, then in Matthew 28, it's mentioned, the Sabbath is mentioned, talking about the time related to his burial and resurrection. So that's not really a command or any rules about it. It's just so we have an understanding of when it happened. The Jewish Sabbath, when the Israelites would celebrate, or I don't know if celebrate's the right word, would honor the Sabbath. The Sabbath was from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. Okay, a full 24 hours. So, basically, Matthew 28:1 just says it was after the Sabbath that Jesus rose. So they're talking about Sunday morning. Anyways, moving on. In Mark 1:21, it says that, let me just read it. And they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching. Okay? So Jesus is teaching on the Sabbath. Well, clearly, if he's teaching on the Sabbath, he did not consider that to be the work that God told them to not do, because he's doing it, and we know that Jesus does not sin. So it's okay to teach the word of God on the Sabbath. Then in Mark chapter 2, 23 to 28. Oh, sorry, I'm holding the microphone. I keep moving this thing around. I hope the audio is okay. This is the same story from Matthew 12. On the Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain, and the Pharisees were saying to him, "Look, why are they doing that? Why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, Have you never read what David did when he was in need and was hungry, and he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar, the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him? And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. So Jesus saying the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The point is that the Sabbath was supposed to benefit man. It was not supposed to be a disadvantage for us. So why was it okay for David to eat on the Sabbath? Well, because he was hungry. Him and his men were hungry, and so they need to eat. Like, that's just a common basic need, and the Sabbath was made for man. It's supposed to benefit you. Okay? Like, it's okay to meet your basic needs on the Sabbath, guys. It's okay to do that. Then in Mark 3, verses 1 through 5, this is talking about when Jesus heals the man with a withered hand. But I want to point out that in verse 4 it says, and he said to them, it is lawful on the Sabbath to do, or is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill? But they were silent, and he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. So Jesus is clearly making the explicit point that it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Okay? So I want you to remember that it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Okay? It is lawful for David to eat and to feed his men on the Sabbath. It is lawful to heal on the Sabbath. It is lawful to preach God's word on the Sabbath, because it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. And he says to save life. Okay, then Mark 6:20, Jesus teaches in Nazareth on the Sabbath. This is when he's rejected by his hometown. Mark 15:42, this is talking about he was buried before the Sabbath. Mark 16:1, he rose after the Sabbath. Then we get into Luke, and Luke 4:16. Let me flip ahead. He's teaching and rejected in Nazareth. And 4:31 to 35 of Luke. I'm flipping there as fast as I can. What did I say? Verses 31 to 35. Okay. And he went down to Capernaum, a city in Galilee, and he was teaching them on the Sabbath. And they were astonished at his teaching, for the word possessed authority. For his word possessed authority. And in the synagogue there was a man who had the spirit of an unclean demon, and he cried out with a loud voice, Ha! What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. But Jesus rebuked him, saying, Be silent and come out of him. When the demon had thrown him down in their midst, he came out of him, having done him no harm. And they were all amazed and said to one another, What is this word? For with authority and power he commands the unclean spirits, and they come out. So on the Sabbath day, Jesus exorcises the demon out of a man. Okay, so it's lawful to exorcise demons on the Sabbath day. Then Luke 6:1 through 5. This is again the story of the disciples in the grain field, but it specifically says in verse 1, the disciples plucked and ate some heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands. Okay, this is important because the Israelites, Jewish people, have this list of what's considered work on the Sabbath. And so it's like 39 different things. One of them is like, okay, this is something stupid. Because they said you couldn't walk more than a mile on the Sabbath day. So when actually at some point it says like a Sabbath day journey. So they would, I think it was like a max of about a kilometer that they could walk on the Sabbath before they considered it work. But the plucking of grain, and then when they rubbed it in their hands, they considered this, I think, threshing it, because you have to get off the chaff or whatever from the grain before you can eat it. And so those two actions that they state are considered work by the Pharisees. The plucking and then the rubbing it in your fingers to get the excess stuff off, that's work. Okay? So that's why the Pharisees are upset. And yeah, but that was specifically a man-made law. But then it's hard because obviously in Numbers you have the story of the guy that's picking up sticks and he gets put to death for it. So that's why so it makes sense how the Pharisees come to this conclusion of it's like everything is work on the Sabbath, because they're kind of doing overkill. They're like, we rather consider everything work and do nothing to make sure we can earn our way to heaven and that we don't mess up. But you're missing the point then, because you can't earn your way to heaven. Like, you're just never going to be perfect enough to do that. So, but that reveals the heart posture, and that they were more worried about doing everything right, trying to earn their way to heaven, rather than taking care of God's people. Okay, moving on. Luke 6:6-10 is Jesus healing the guy's withered hand on the Sabbath. Then Luke 13:10-7. Let me flip there. I'm almost there. Okay. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and behold, there was a woman who had a disabling spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not fully straighten herself. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said to her, "Woman, you are freed from your disability." And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and she glorified God. But the ruler of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, said to the people, "There are 6 days in which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day." Then the Lord answered him, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to water it? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan bound for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day?" As he said these things, all his adversaries were put to shame, and all the people rejoiced by the glorious things that were done by him. Okay, sorry. Again, Jesus points out to the value of people above animals, and that they would take care of their animals on the Sabbath, but then, for some reason, not take care of human beings who are made in God's image. And so, he is teaching on the Sabbath and casts out a disabling spirit, guys. So, it's, again, you are allowed to teach and heal on the Sabbath. Okay, it is lawful for you to do good on the Sabbath. Okay, continuing on, Luke 14:1-6. Okay, one Sabbath, when he went to dine at the house of a ruler of the Pharisees, they were watching him carefully, and behold, there was a man before him who had dropsy. I had to Google what dropsy is. It's known as edema. I think it's edema and not edema. I don't know. Which is excess fluid and swelling. Okay. And Jesus responded to the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. Then he took him and healed him and sent him away. And he said to them, "Which of you, having a son or an ox that has fallen into a well on a Sabbath day, will not immediately pull him out?" And they could not reply to these things. So, again, hardness of heart and them being stupid. That's really all to say about that. Okay, Luke 23, verse 54 and 56. And then verse 24:1 is all about the resurrection and using the Sabbath as your time reference. Then we get into John 5:8-18. I'm almost there. Okay, John 5. All right. 8 through 18. Okay, this is when Jesus heals the man at the pool. Was it Bethesda? I think it is. Verse 8, Jesus said to him, "Get up, take your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." Again, the Jews had made rules of what they think it means for it to be work, and carrying was one of them. So the fact that this man was carrying something, his bed, they considered it work, and they thought he's profaning the Sabbath. Verse 11, but he answered them, "The man who healed me, that man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterward Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." Okay, so God's work does not stop for the Sabbath. It's a holy day meant to sanctify you, and so God's work is allowed. It is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Okay. John 7:21-24. This is just the Pharisees talking about how they want to kill Jesus for breaking the Sabbath, but it was for him healing and doing good things. John 9:14-16. He healed a blind man on the Sabbath. John 19, verse 31 is talking about his burial prep related to his death on the Sabbath, or burial prep for his death related to the Sabbath. Wow, I really struggled with that one. In Acts 1:12, the verse uses the term Sabbath day journey. Again, Jews could not travel more than 1 kilometer, or it was considered work. And they extrapolated this idea from Exodus 16:29, where it says, "Remain each of you in his place." Okay, then Acts 13:14. Paul and Barnabas go to a synagogue on the Sabbath. In Acts 13, let me go there. Okay, 13, verse 27. It says, "For those who live in Jerusalem and their rulers, because they did not recognize him nor understand the utterances of the prophets, which are read every Sabbath, fulfilled them by condemning him." So they're teaching, and which they're teaching on the Sabbath, and Paul is saying, you hear the scriptures about the Messiah every week on the Sabbath, and despite hearing about them every week, you guys still didn't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. And then in verse 42 and 44, let's go there. Verse 42. As they went out, the people begged that these things might be told them the next Sabbath. And after the meeting of the synagogue broke up, many Jews and devout converts to Judaism followed Paul and Barnabas, who, as they spoke with them, urged them to continue in the grace of God. The next Sabbath, almost the whole city gathered to hear the word of the Lord. So again, Paul and Barnabas are teaching the word of the Lord on the Sabbath. Okay, following Jesus' example. And then in Acts, here's all these verses where it says, it's talking about the Torah being read every Sabbath, and basically Paul teaching on it every Sabbath to persuade and convert people. Again, on the Sabbath. So Acts 15:21, 16:13, 17:2, and 18:4. Okay. Then we get to Colossians. Let me flip ahead. Okay. In Colossians 2, we're going to read 6-15. Okay? So let's jump into it. What did I say? 6-15. Therefore, as you received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk in him, rooted and built up in him, and established in the faith, just as you were taught, abounding in thanksgiving. See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. For in him the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily, and you have been filled in him, who is the head of all rule and authority. In him also you were circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through faith in powerful working of God, who raised him from the dead. And you who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, and having forgiven us all our trespasses, by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. Verse 16. Therefore let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath. These are a shadow of things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Let no one disqualify you, insisting on asceticism and worship of angels, going on in detail about visions, puffed up without reason by his sensuous mind, and not holding fast to the head, from whom the whole body, nourished and knit together through its joints and ligaments, grows with a growth that is from God. Okay? So, the point being made here, that Jesus died for your sins, he renewed you, and you are a new creation in Christ. Okay? So, the Sabbath and these other traditions and rituals are not what make you holy. It's the fact that Christ died for you that makes you holy. And then Hebrews, okay, so in the book of Hebrews, it does talk about the Sabbath, kind of, but Hebrews is a dense book to read, and that it has a lot to unpack. Okay, so I'm gonna flip there, and I should have reread this before I started doing it, but we're gonna see what I remember. So, in Hebrews, in chapter 2, verse 9, it says Jesus tasted death for everyone. Then in chapter 3, verses 18 and 19, the Israelites didn't find rest because of their disobedience to God. Okay? They did not trust God, which revealed their disbelief. Then in Hebrews 4, it says, therefore, while the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it, for good news came to us, just as to them, talking about the Israelites, but the message they heard did not benefit them, because they were not united by faith with those who listened. Okay, so the message of God did not benefit the Israelites in the history, because they did not believe. Verse 3, for we who have believed enter that rest, as he has said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not rest. Okay, this is quoting, let me see, what verse was that? Verse 3. Okay, it's quoting Psalm 95, verse 11, and that the Israelites had no rest because of their disbelief. Okay, God did not give them rest. Then, verse 4. Oh, wait, I didn't finish reading verse 3. Okay, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although his works were finished from the foundation of the world. For he has spoken somewhere of the seventh day in this way. Okay, the seventh day, the Sabbath. And God rested on the seventh day from all his works. Okay, verse 5. And again, in this passage, he said, they shall not enter my rest. Okay, they did not believe in God, they did not trust in God, and so they did not find rest, his ultimate Sabbath rest. Verse 6. Since therefore it remains for some to enter, and those who formerly received the good news failed to enter because of disobedience, again he appoints a certain day, today, saying through David so long afterward, and the words already quoted. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. Okay, so again, this is quoting Psalm 95 verses 7 through 11. Okay, but today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. Verse 8, for if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken of another day later on. So then therefore remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God, for whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. So, saying that there's still a Sabbath rest for people today if they believe and rest in God. Okay, so but some people will talk about this passage and say that, like, basically if you believe you have a Sabbath rest like all the time, that you're always resting in the Lord, which is kind of, honestly, it feels like Christianese, like when people are just like, you just have to rest in the Lord, just give it to God or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but what does that really mean? You know what I'm saying? So you can come to your own conclusion. All that is to say that obviously, I don't know the nitty-gritty details and the understanding of Hebrews 4 talking about the Sabbath. Besides that, there is still a Sabbath rest to be found. Now, is it talking about that you literally rest in God all the time? Could be. Is it talking about maybe just the literal Sabbath day? Could be. I think it's probably closer to the all the time kind of thing. Because, Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount that he, what is it? That he takes our yoke or whatever, if you're heavy laden, all that good stuff. Okay, that he gives us peace and rest. Anyways, now, after all that we read, should we still follow the Sabbath? Okay, we have Colossians, which tells us, following the Sabbath is not what earns us our salvation. But then also in the Old Testament, if you didn't follow it, your punishment was death. And then Jesus, who it seems like if you're looking at the surface, didn't really follow the Sabbath. So what's the conclusion? Okay, party people, my phone storage filled up, so the video cut out. I just have the worst luck. So anyways, here is my conclusion. Okay. The Sabbath was part of God's good design before sin entered the world in Genesis 2 and 3. And so it was part of his original plan that we would rest on the Sabbath. He set the example in that he created the universe in 6 days, rested on the seventh, made it holy. Okay? So I think it's important that we continue resting on the Sabbath, okay? He gives the 10 Commandments, which the fourth commandment is to rest on the Sabbath, okay? And then we have, I think it's in Isaiah or Jeremiah, somewhere in the Old Testament, I forgot to add it in here, that the commandments are written on our heart. So if they're written on our heart, that includes resting on the Sabbath. And I know that we have Jesus who fulfills the law, but it says he fulfills the law, does not abolish it. And then he still gives us his two greatest commandments, which is to love God with all your heart, soul, whatever, and then love your neighbors. Well, those two greatest commandments are like the summary of the 10 commandments, okay? When you love God, that is obeying the first 4 commandments. And then when you love your neighbor, that's obeying the six other commandments, okay? So, yes, I think we should still be following the Sabbath. I think it's good for us. Like, God intended us to rest. We are part of our good design is that we work and then we rest. It's good for you, okay? And then we also have, so stipulations for working on the Sabbath, okay? Well, I shouldn't say working, okay? Jesus tells us it's lawful to do good, and then he preaches on the Sabbath. He would heal people, and then we have Paul who would also preach and teach on the Sabbath, and I'm sure healing people. So it's lawful for us to do good on the Sabbath. So if it's your rest day but someone asks you to help them with something, don't be like, oh no, I can't because it's the Sabbath. No, it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Okay? You might be thinking now, okay, well, which day should we celebrate the Sabbath on? Because we have the Jews who celebrated from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. Oh, shoot. Sorry, guys. I hit my microphone cord. And I'm going to grab my laptop, which I should have pulled this freaking passage up beforehand. But we know for sure that the early church practiced the Sabbath on Sunday. Now, you might be thinking, how do we know that? Well, first of all, in around 70 AD, the Christians were kicked out of the synagogues. The Jewish people wanted to be separate from them. So there was the start of this separation between Christians practicing, Christianity similar to how the Jews would practice, because many of them were former Jews, not all of them, but many of them. And then we have in around 155 AD, so this would be about 100 years, a little over 100 years after Jesus was crucified, which seems like a long time, but in a historical perspective is like really soon. And so we have this letter from Justin Martyr, who was the student of a apostle, I believe. So I think he was either under Paul, John, or Peter. I don't remember who. And then they had someone who discipled under them. And then they had, I think, okay, you can Google Justin Martyr, figure it out for yourself. But if you go to the First Apology by Justin Martyr and go to chapter 67, and I'm going to read it for you, okay? And we afterwards continually remind each other of these things, and the wealthy among us help the needy, and we always keep together for all things wherewith we are supplied. We bless the Maker of all through his Son Jesus Christ, and through the Holy Ghost. And on the day called Sunday, all who live in the cities or in the country gather together to one place, and the memoirs of the apostles or the writings of the prophets are read, as long as time permits. Then, when the reader has ceased, the president verbally instructs and exhorts to the imitation of these good things. Then we all rise together and pray, as we said before. When our prayer is ended, bread and wine and water are brought, and the president in like manner offers prayers and thanksgivings according to his ability, and the people assent, saying Amen. And there is a distribution to each, and a participation of that over which thanks have been given, and to those who are absent a portion is sent by the deacons. And they who are well-to-do and willing give what each thinks fit, and what is collected is deposited with the president, who succors the orphans and widows, and those who, through sickness or any other cause, are in want, and those who are in bonds, and the strangers sojourning among us, and in a word takes care of all who are in need. But Sunday is the day on which we all hold our common Savior on the same day rose from the dead. Sorry, I just skipped a line. I messed up in reading. Okay, on which we all hold our common assembly, because it is the first day on which God, having wrought a change in the darkness of matter, made the world, and Jesus Christ, our Savior, on the same day rose from the dead. For he was crucified on the day before that of Saturday, and on the day after that of Saturn, which is the day of the sun, having appeared to his apostles and disciples, he taught them these things, which we have submitted to you also for your consideration. So, the early church had switched to practicing their Sabbath on the Sunday because that's the day that Christ was crucified. Okay, clearly said in that. Now you might be thinking, okay, which one of those should I do? Or what if you work on Sunday? Well, if you remember, Paul writes in Colossians that basically you're like practicing the Sabbath doesn't affect your salvation, okay? But remember, really none of our acts affect our salvation, but our keeping them is a symptom of our faith. Remember from James, faith without works is dead, okay? Your works don't earn you salvation. Your behavior does not earn you salvation, but it reflects your salvation, okay, people? So if you work on Sunday or Saturday or whatever, pick a different day. Just pick a different day, because as we know, the day that you're practicing the Sabbath is not going to be what keeps you from getting in to heaven, okay? So, but because we want to practice the Sabbath, that it's a day set aside for rest, that sanctifies us, that sets us apart, that we want to pick a day and stick to it. So if you work on Saturday or Sunday, pick Monday or Tuesday. Monday is popular for pastors because obviously they work on Sunday. So pick whatever day works and then stick to it, okay? Maybe in one season you'll need to change it, okay? So for however many months you do it on Sunday, and then something comes up, and so you switch it to Tuesday for the foreseeable future. That's fine, but let's not switch it every week and just be like, oh, well, I don't feel like doing anything today, so I'm going to say today's the Sabbath. That's not very intentional, and that mindset is not sanctifying us or setting us apart. So pick a day, be consistent. That day is to rest and to honor God, and it is lawful to do good. So if you're resting from your normal work, it should not look like your ordinary day, okay? So try and make it look different. If you work out, like me and Nick, we like to work out Monday through Saturday. So Sunday, we are not working out. We try and do our grocery shopping during the week and avoid, sorry, my cat is freaking out. Avoid doing our normal routine on Sunday, okay? Sunday's for relaxing or doing good, and we should be in the Word, and we can fellowship with other people, have dinner with friends or whatever. It should be a good day. Like the Sabbath, I really want the Sabbath to be a day that I look forward to, and I just told Nick this past Sunday was the first Sabbath that I felt restful the entire day. Because at first, it's uncomfortable, because it would, morning I'd be like, oh great, I'm doing nothing all day, and then it gets to afternoon and evening, I'm like, I've been a bum, I have not been productive, I need to get stuff done, and I want to start going around the house cleaning and doing stuff, and it's like, whoa, it feels uncomfortable because it's not part of the routine, but the rest is necessary, and the fact that I'm so uncomfortable not doing something points to that being a problem. So, okay, pick a day, be intentional. That day is set apart for doing good, for being in the Word, and resting. Okay, this day is supposed to sanctify us, set us apart. So that's my conclusion, people. It's good to keep the Sabbath. I like doing Sunday. That works for us. But if Sunday doesn't work for you, choose a different day. Okay, it's all about the heart posture. So ultimately, the most important thing in this is your conviction. So read the Word on your own. If you come to a different conviction than me, that's great. You do you, girl. But it's the conviction that matters. So read the Word, and if God convicts you of something, you should obey it. I don't remember what verse it is, but it's basically along the lines of like, if you're not convicted, then it's not a sin. But if you're convicted and still do it, it's a sin. I know in James it says, for him who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, for him it is sin. So if you feel convicted, obey your convictions and get your heart posture right with God. Okay, that's all I have to say. Hope you have a blessed, amazing day. Peace.